Arizona Territory, 1873. The frontier town of Willow Creek shimmered under the merciless August sun like a mirage, fragile and uncertain against the vast desert landscape. Sage Quincy pulled his bandana over his nose, squinting through the dust kicked up by his horse's hooves as he approached the small settlement. At 25, he had already learned the hard truth of the West. A man rode alone, trusted no one, and never put down roots. The frontier demanded this wisdom, paid for in blood and betrayal. 3 years as a cattle driver had taught Sage that attachment was dangerous in a land where death visited as regularly as the seasons changed. His parents' homestead had burned when he was 17, his father shot defending it from rustlers. His mother had died of fever the following winter. Since then, Sage had kept moving, finding work where he could, leaving before connections could form. Everything a man loves becomes a weapon that can be used against him, he muttered to his horse, Cisco, who flicked an ear in response. We're just passing through, old boy. Supplies, maybe a bath, then back on the trail. Sage's immediate goal was simple. Deliver a message to the Rocking Our Ranch on behalf of his current employer, collect his wages, and move on before winter. What he truly needed, though he'd never admit it, was something to fill the hollow space that grew larger with each empty mile of trail. Willow Creek seemed like dozens of other frontier towns, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a combination saloon and hotel, general store, smithy, and a modest white-clapboard church. What distinguished it was the absence of the usual chaos. No drunken shouting from the saloon, no horses tied at hitching posts. Even the mercantile's porch stood empty of the usual loafers. As Sage passed the church, he noticed a small gathering in the cemetery behind it. A funeral. He removed his hat respectfully as he rode by, not wanting to intrude on private grief. The door of the mercantile jingled as Sage entered, boots leaving dusty prints on the wooden floor. The shopkeeper, a round man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger. Afternoon, stranger. What can I help you with? Need supplies, Sage replied, setting his hat on the counter. Some coffee, beans, bacon if you've got it. Heading out to the Rocking R tomorrow. The shopkeeper's expression shifted. Rocking R? That's Mrs. Robbins' place now. Her husband was just laid to rest today. Sage's stomach tightened. The message in his saddlebag was addressed to Thomas Robbins, informing him that a herd would be passing through his land next month. I didn't know. Accident. Fever took him, just like it nearly took half the town last month. Thomas fought it hard, but the man shook his head. Left his widow with a ranch to run and not much help. Most hands left when he fell ill, fearing contagion. As Sage gathered his supplies, the shop door opened again. He turned to see a young woman enter, dressed in black, her face partially obscured by a mourning veil. Even through the dark fabric, he could make out delicate features and eyes reddened from crying. Mrs. Robbins, the shopkeeper said softly. I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am. She nodded, lifting her veil to reveal a face that, despite grief's shadow, possessed a natural beauty that made Sage look away quickly. Her hair was the color of wheat in late summer, pulled back simply beneath her black bonnet. She couldn't have been more than 22. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, she replied, her voice steady despite her evident exhaustion. I need to settle Thomas's account and order supplies for the ranch. Of course, whatever you need. Sage moved to leave, uncomfortable intruding on her grief, when the shopkeeper called out. Oh, Mrs. Robbins, this gentleman is headed out to your place tomorrow. Has a message for your husband. She turned toward him, and Sage felt oddly exposed under her direct gaze. Her eyes were a clear blue, like the sky after rain. I'm Violet Robbins, she said. Whatever business you had with my husband, you can discuss with me now. Something in her chin-up defiance stirred Sage's respect. Here was a woman who had just buried her husband, yet stood with dignity, already shouldering his responsibilities. Ma'am, he nodded. Sage Quincy. I'm just carrying word from the Circle K that they'll be driving cattle through the western pasture next month. They were hoping to arrange water rights at the creek crossing. She assessed him with a gaze too perceptive for comfort. Are you one of their drovers? He corrected. My employment ended with delivering this message. Do you have other work lined up, Mr. Quincy? The question surprised him. Not yet, ma'am. I generally find something. Violet Robbins removed her gloves deliberately, tucking them into a small reticule. Then I have a proposition. The rocking needs hands. Most left when Thomas fell ill. I need someone who knows cattle and can handle himself. The position of foreman is open, if you're interested. The shopkeeper interjected. Mrs. Robbins, are you certain? You hardly know this man. She didn't look away from Sage. I'm a fair judge of character, Mr. Peterson, and I haven't the luxury of time for formal introductions. Winter's coming, and I have cattle to move to lower pastures. Sage shook his head. I appreciate the offer, ma'am, but I don't stay in one place long. I'm not asking for forever, Mr. Quincy, just until spring. By then I'll have had time to find permanent help. Her tone was practical, businesslike. The pay is fair, and there's a cabin for the foreman's use. Every instinct told Sage to refuse. Getting entangled in someone else's troubles was precisely what he'd spent years avoiding. Yet something, perhaps the quiet dignity with which she faced her impossible situation, made him hesitate. I can give you 3 months, he found himself saying. Through the worst of winter. Then I'll move on. Relief flickered across her features. That will do for now. Can you ride out with me today? There's much to discuss. And so, against every rule he'd made for himself, Sage Quincy found himself riding beside Violet Robbins toward the rocking R, the fresh grave of her husband barely covered, and the uncertainties of winter looming before them both. The rocking R ranch sprawled across a valley beneath the shadow of pine-covered mountains, more substantial than Sage had expected. A 2-story main house of solid logs stood proudly amid several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. It spoke of prosperity and hard work, a legacy built by the man now lying in Willow Creek Cemetery. Thomas and I came here 5 years ago, Violet explained as they approached. It was nothing but an abandoned trapper's cabin and wild meadow then. You've built something impressive, Sage acknowledged. Thomas did. Her voice faltered for the first time. I just kept house. They rode in silence to the barn, where Sage helped her dismount. Up close, he noticed the fine trembling in her hands despite her composed expression. She had buried her husband that morning, yet carried herself with determination that commanded respect. There's stew from the funeral gathering, she said. I'll show you to the foreman's cabin after we eat. Then tomorrow we can assess what needs immediate attention. Over a simple meal at the kitchen table, Violet explained the ranch's situation. 3 hands remained, all older men loyal to the ranch but insufficient for the work ahead. The cattle needed moving from summer to winter pasture, hay required stacking, and repairs needed completion before snow flew. Thomas had plans, she said, staring into her coffee cup. He was going to expand next spring, build a proper operation that could withstand the seasons. Now I just need to hold what we have. Why not sell? Sage asked. A young widow alone, her gaze snapped up. This is my home, Mr. Quincy. Thomas and I built it together. His dreams are in every board, every acre. I won't abandon them. That night in the small foreman's cabin, Sage unpacked his meager possessions and questioned his decision. Getting involved with the rocking R, with a widow's struggle, was asking for complications. Yet he'd given his word, and for 3 months, he would honor it. Come spring, he would ride away, as he always did. The following weeks settled into a rhythm of hard work from dawn until dusk. Sage hired 2 additional hands from a nearby settlement, organized the cattle drive to winter pasture, and supervised repairs to outbuildings and fences. He kept his interactions with Violet professional and brief, joining her at the main house only when necessary to discuss ranch business. But as October painted the aspen groves golden, he found himself watching her more carefully. The grief that had initially shrouded her began to lift, revealing a woman of remarkable capability. She kept the ranch books with precision, negotiated hay prices with neighboring ranchers, and learned quickly when Sage explained cattle matters. One evening, returning from the north pasture, Sage spotted Violet in the garden behind the main house, harvesting the last vegetables before frost claimed them. Her morning black had given way to practical work dresses, and today she wore blue, the color deepening her eyes. Her wheat blonde hair was pinned up, wisps escaping around her face as she worked. Without intending to, Sage found himself dismounting and approaching. Need help with those pumpkins, Mrs. Robbins? She looked up, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Thank you. They're heavier than they look. Together, they harvested the remaining produce. When they finished, she invited him to stay for supper, something she'd done occasionally when work ran late. I was married at 18, she said unexpectedly as they ate. Thomas was 15 years older, established. He offered security, kindness. Sage said nothing, surprised by the personal turn. It wasn't a grand passion, she continued softly. But we were content. He was a good man. You don't need to explain anything to me, ma'am. Perhaps I'm explaining it to myself. She met his eyes. I've been a wife, then a widow. I'm trying to determine who Violet Robbins is now. Something shifted between them that evening, a tentative bridge across the professional distance they'd maintained. In the weeks that followed, their conversations gradually extended beyond ranch matters. She told him about growing up in Kansas, losing her parents to a grasshopper plague that destroyed their farm. He shared carefully edited stories of his years on cattle drives, though he kept the deeper pains buried. The first snow came in mid-November, earlier than expected. Sage and the hands spent days ensuring livestock had shelter and feed access. When he finally returned to his cabin late one night, nearly frozen and exhausted, he found a pot of stew keeping warm on his stove and fresh bread wrapped in a cloth, Violet's handiwork. The gesture unsettled him more than it should have. Kindness created expectations, formed connections that inevitably led to pain. He reminded himself firmly that when spring arrived, he would leave the rocking R and its widow behind. December brought a blizzard that howled across the valley for 3 days. When it finally cleared, Sage organized the men to check for stranded cattle. He took the western section himself, riding through drifts that reached Cisco's chest in places. Near the boundary fence, he discovered 3 cows trapped in a ravine, half buried in snow. Hours passed as he worked to free them, the temperature dropping dangerously as afternoon waned. By the time he turned toward home, darkness was falling, and with it, the temperature plummeted further. Cisco stumbled, exhausted, and Sage realized they were in trouble. The landmarks had disappeared under uniform white, and his fingers had gone numb inside his gloves. He dismounted to walk beside Cisco, knowing that stopping meant freezing to death. The wind picked up again, driving needles of ice into his face. Disorientation set in, a deadly symptom he recognized from winters on the plains. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a faint light appeared in the distance. Summoning his remaining strength, Sage pushed forward, eventually discerning the outline of the rocking R's main house. Violet stood on the porch, a lantern held high, scanning the darkness. "Sage," she cried when she spotted him, rushing down the steps regardless of the snow. Thank God. She helped him into the house, taking Cisco to the barn while Sage collapsed before the roaring fire. When she returned, she quickly assessed his condition. "Your hands, they're frostbitten," she said, filling a basin with cool water. "We need to warm them slowly." The pain as feeling returned was excruciating. Sage bit back groans as Violet gently tended to his hands, then his face, which had also suffered from the cold. "The men returned hours ago," she explained, her voice tight with what he belatedly recognized as fear. "When you didn't come back, they wanted to search, but the storm was building again. I've been watching from the window since sunset." "You shouldn't have worried," he managed, though the evidence of her concern stirred something dangerous within him. "Shouldn't I?" Her eyes met his, challenging. "Would you have me indifferent to whether you lived or died out there?" The question hung between them, laden with implications neither was prepared to address. She insisted he stay in the house that night, too weak to return to his cabin. Sage slept on a pallet before the fire, waking frequently to find Violet checking on him, adding wood to the fire, ensuring his hands remained wrapped in clean bandages. In the vulnerable space between sleep and waking, he realized his carefully constructed walls were developing cracks. Violet Robbins, with her quiet strength and unflinching care, was becoming important to him, a dangerous development for a man who'd sworn never to put down roots. As December deepened toward Christmas, the ranch settled into winter's enforced quiet. Most essential work was complete, leaving shorter days filled with maintenance tasks and preparations for spring. Sage found himself spending more evenings at the main house, initially with the excuse of planning for the coming year, then simply for the comfort of Violet's company. One evening, she asked him to help bring Christmas decorations down from the attic. Wooden ornaments, candle holders, and greenery Thomas had always arranged around the house. "You don't have to do this," Sage said gently, seeing her fingers tremble as she opened the crate of decorations. "No one would think less of you for skipping Christmas this year." "Thomas loved Christmas," she replied. "He would want the house to celebrate, even if—" She left the thought unfinished. Together they decorated the main room, hanging pine boughs and setting candles in windows. Violet unwrapped each ornament carefully, sharing stories of Christmases past. When they finished, she stood in the center of the room, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. "It's not the same," she admitted softly, "but it's still beautiful." Sage found himself moving toward her, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Violet," he said, the first time he'd used her given name. "You've done remarkably. This ranch, these past months, most would have crumbled." "I've had help," she said, looking up at him. "You've been. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stayed." The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Sage was acutely aware of their proximity, of the way the candlelight gilded her hair and softened her features. For one dangerous moment, he imagined what it would be like to close the distance between them, to discover if her lips were as soft as they appeared. Instead, he stepped back, reality crashing down around him. She was his employer, a widow still mourning, and he was a drifter who would be gone by spring. Any other thinking was foolishness. "It's getting late," he said abruptly. "I should check on the horses before turning in." If disappointment flickered across her face, he forced himself not to notice it. Christmas Day brought unexpected visitors. Sage was checking fence lines when he spotted 3 riders approaching from town: the banker from Willow Creek, another man he didn't recognize, and the young widow's brother-in-law, Seth Robbins, who had attended the funeral but left immediately after. Seth was the opposite of his late brother, flashy, quick-talking, with a gambler's calculating eyes. Sage had disliked him instantly, sensing something predatory beneath his sympathetic words to Violet. He rode to intercept them before they reached the main house. "Afternoon, gentlemen." Mrs. Robbins wasn't expecting visitors. The banker, Harris, nodded cordially. "Mr. Quincy, we have business with Mrs. Robbins. A matter of some urgency." "Christmas Day seems an unusual time for banking matters," Sage observed. Seth Robbins flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Family matters, too, Quincy. I'm sure my sister-in-law will want to hear what we have to say." Reluctantly, Sage escorted them to the house, where Violet received them with surprised hospitality, insisting they warm themselves and offering coffee. "I'll get right to it, Mrs. Robbins," said the banker after preliminary pleasantries. "There's the matter of your husband's loan." Violet's cup paused halfway to her lips. "Loan?" Thomas didn't mention any outstanding loans. "Taken out last summer," Harris explained, producing papers from his breast pocket. "For expansion of the herd. Quite substantial, with the first payment due after winter." Seth interjected smoothly. "My brother always had big dreams. But he wasn't always practical about the financial side of things." The third man, introduced as a lawyer from the territorial capital, cleared his throat. "The situation is straightforward, Mrs. Robbins. There's a substantial sum due in February, with the full amount to be repaid over 3 years." Sage watched realization dawn on Violet's face. The payment would consume most of the ranch's winter reserves, leaving little for spring operations. "Why wasn't I aware of this?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Seth shrugged. "Thomas probably didn't want to worry you, especially with the baby coming." Silence fell like an anvil. Violet's face drained of color. "How did you know about that?" she whispered. "Thomas wrote to me," Seth said. "Said you were expecting. Due in June, I believe." He was overjoyed, said it made the expansion all the more important, building a legacy and all that. Sage felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath him. Violet was with child, Thomas's child, a fact she hadn't shared with him or anyone at the ranch. The banker continued, oblivious to the tension. "Given your situation, Mrs. Robbins, there is an alternative to meeting these payments. Mr. Robbins here has made a generous offer to purchase the ranch outright, assuming the debt and providing you with enough to establish yourself comfortably elsewhere." "How convenient," Sage said, unable to contain himself. "The loan comes due when Mrs. Robbins is most vulnerable, and her brother-in-law appears with a solution that gives him the ranch." Seth's eyes hardened. "Watch yourself, Cowboy. This is family business." Violet stood abruptly. "I need time to review these papers. Please excuse me if I don't see you out. Mr. Quincy can show you to your horses." Once the men had departed with promises to return after the new year for her answer, Sage found Violet in the kitchen, staring out the window at the snow-covered mountains. "You're with child," he said quietly. She nodded without turning. "For months along. I discovered it just before Thomas fell ill. He never knew." The revelation explained much: her determination to keep the ranch, her refusal to consider selling. This wasn't just about honoring her husband's dreams. It was about securing her child's future. "Why didn't you tell me?" She finally faced him. "At first, it was too raw, too private. Then, I feared it might change how you saw me, how you treated me. I needed your help, your honest assessment of the ranch's viability, not your pity." "And the loan? Did you know about that?" "No," she said, distress evident in her voice. "Thomas handled the finances. He mentioned expansion plans, but not that he'd borrowed against the ranch to fund them." Sage paced the kitchen, thinking rapidly. "Seth's timing is too convenient. And why would Thomas not tell you about a loan affecting the ranch's future? You think something's not right." "I think we need to look at those loan papers carefully. And I think Seth Robbins showing up with an offer to buy just when the loan comes due is suspicious at best." The days following Christmas were tense with uncertainty. Sage and Violet pored over the ranch records, trying to determine if the loan had actually funded the expansion Thomas had planned. The bank drafts showed money withdrawn, but there was no corresponding increase in cattle or equipment. Where did it go? Violet wondered, frustration evident as they sat at the kitchen table surrounded by ledgers. $3,000 doesn't simply disappear. Sage had been wondering the same thing. When did Thomas last visit the territorial capital? August. He was gone nearly 2 weeks, said he was arranging cattle purchases for spring delivery. Her eyes widened with sudden understanding. "You think Seth was involved? I think it's worth investigating whether your brother-in-law was in the capital at the same time." New Year's Day brought heavy snow and an unexpected visitor. Sage was clearing paths between the buildings when he spotted a horseman struggling through the drifts. He recognized Martin Kelly, who owned the saloon in Willow Creek and served as the town's unofficial postmaster. "Brought this special delivery," Kelly said, handing over a thick envelope. "Come all the way from Denver. Marked urgent for Mrs. Robbins." Sage brought the package to Violet, who opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter and several bank drafts. "It's from Mr. Patterson, Thomas's lawyer in Denver," she said, scanning the pages. Thomas sent him a letter just before he fell ill, instructing him to investigate Seth. She looked up, eyes wide. "Sage, the loan wasn't legitimate. Seth forged Thomas's signature after getting him drunk in the Capitol. The money went to Seth's gambling debts." The pieces fell into place. Seth had manipulated his brother, then waited for the opportunity to claim the ranch when the fraudulent loan came due. Patterson writes that he's gathered evidence, including testimony from the saloon owner who witnessed Seth pressuring Thomas to sign papers while intoxicated. He's prepared to testify that the loan is fraudulent. Relief washed over her face, then determination. When Seth returns, he'll find more than he bargained for. 3 days later, Seth Robbins and the banker returned, confident they would be leaving with signed sale papers. Instead, they found Violet waiting with Martin Kelly, who served as a part-time deputy, and the evidence Patterson had compiled. "You're not getting this ranch, Seth," Violet said firmly. "The loan is fraudulent, and Mr. Kelly here is prepared to arrest you for forgery if you don't sign a confession and release the ranch from all claims." Seth's face contorted with rage. "You think you can run this place alone? A woman with a baby on the way? You'll fail, and when you do, I'll be waiting to pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar." "She's not alone," Sage said, stepping forward. "And the rocking isn't failing. Not now, not ever." After Seth and the banker departed, Seth under escort to face charges, the banker apologizing profusely for his unwitting role in the scheme, Violet turned to Sage. "Did you mean that?" she asked quietly. "About me not being alone?" The question laid bare the crossroads they had reached. His 3 months were nearly up, spring approaching with its promise of open trails and the freedom he'd always chosen. "I meant it," he said slowly, "but I don't know what that means for us. I've spent years believing that staying in one place, forming attachments, was asking for pain. And what do you believe now?" The question penetrated defenses built over years of solitude and loss. What did he believe? That the fierce protectiveness he felt for Violet and her unborn child was something he could simply ride away from? That the way his heart lifted when she smiled was temporary? I believe I'm afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if I stay, I'll eventually lose you too. Everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me. She stepped closer, her eyes holding his. Is that why you keep moving? To outrun loss. I thought I was being smart. Practical. The frontier isn't kind to those who put down roots. No, she agreed. But it's even less kind to those who face it alone. She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach, where the slight swell of new life was just becoming visible. Some things are worth the risk, Sage. The simple gesture broke something open inside him. A dam holding back years of loneliness and carefully maintained isolation. The truth he'd been avoiding crashed through. He loved her. Not just her determination or her courage, but her gentleness, her quiet laughter, the way she saw possibilities instead of limitations. I don't know how to stay in one place anymore, he confessed. I don't know if I remember how to build something lasting. Then we'll learn together, she said simply. Day by day. When he finally kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. Familiar and new all at once. Her arms wound around his neck, and he held her carefully, mindful of the precious life she carried. That night, they sat before the fire and shared the truths they'd both kept hidden. He told her about his parents' deaths, about the guilt that had driven him to keep moving rather than face his failure to protect them. She spoke of her fears for her child's future, her determination that her baby would know the love of both parents, even if one was only a cherished memory. I won't ask you to forget Thomas, Sage said, holding her hand in his. He'll always be part of your life, part of your child's heritage. And I won't ask you to be him, she replied. I'm not looking for a replacement, Sage. I'm looking toward the future, our future, if you want it. Spring came to the Rocking R with a riot of wildflowers across the lower meadows and the promise of new beginnings. The ranch thrived under their joint care, Sage's practical knowledge and Violet's careful planning, creating a partnership that extended beyond business. On a perfect May morning, with the mountains still capped in snow but the valley lush with new growth, Sage took Violet to the highest point on the ranch. Below them spread the land they had protected together, and beyond that, the endless horizon that had once called to him with promises of freedom. I used to think that staying meant being trapped, he said, taking her hands in his. But I've learned something these past months. True freedom isn't about where you can go. It's about where you choose to be. He knelt before her, the woman whose strength and tenderness had healed wounds he'd thought permanent. Violet Robbins, I love you. I love the family we're creating. Will you marry me? Her smile rivaled the sunrise. Yes, Sage Quincy. Yes. They were married 2 weeks later in the white clapboard church of Willow Creek, Violet radiant in a dress of pale blue that matched her eyes, her pregnancy now a visible promise of their future. Sage stood tall beside her, the restlessness that had driven him for years finally quieted by the certainty that he had found his place in the world. In July, Violet gave birth to a healthy son they named Thomas Sage Robbins, honoring both the past and the present. As Sage held his stepson for the first time, the fierce protectiveness he felt confirmed what he already knew. Love wasn't weakness on the frontier, it was the greatest strength a man could possess. The Rocking R expanded as they had planned, becoming one of the territory's most prosperous ranches. Over the years, Thomas would be joined by 3 siblings, 2 sisters, and a brother, all bearing the Quincy name, but growing up knowing the legacy of both their fathers. On their 5th anniversary, Sage brought Violet back to the hilltop where he had proposed. The ranch had grown, with new barns, expanded pastures, and a larger house to accommodate their growing family. But more important than these visible signs of prosperity was the home they had built together, a place of laughter, love, and safety in a land that demanded courage from those who would tame it. Do you ever miss it? Violet asked as they watched the sun set over their domain. The open trail, the freedom to go anywhere. Sage smiled, drawing her close against the evening chill. I found something better than freedom to leave, he said softly. I found freedom to stay. The frontier had taught Sage Quincy many hard lessons, but Violet had taught him the most important one of all, that a heart closed against pain also closes against joy. In opening himself to love's possibilities, he had discovered that true courage wasn't found in facing the wilderness alone, but in building something lasting amid its challenges. The cowboy who believed love had no place on the frontier had found not just love but family, home, and purpose, all in the heart of a young widow who had refused to surrender to loss.